The kind of crazy thing to me is that it feels like I just recorded my GDL draft analysis, which I recorded 2 months ago, but all my days have been running together lately. It seems kind of crazy to me that we're already doing another draft analysis. This time for the APA. Que pasa YouTube? How's it going, guys? SixftHax here, aka Leo, coach of your Durham Druddigons, a previous APA champion. By the way, for those of you who may not know or may not remember, we did end up winning APA Season 3. And this time we are on APA Season 6. We have an absolutely stacked roster. There is 19 other coaches, if I'm not mistaken. And we have some pretty tough competition. We have the return of Chimpact, which is awesome. We have the debuts of Mr. Jambad and Lord Moet in the Draft League format. We have the solidified competitors in Pokemon MD, Kelly under the radar, Lord Envy, the homies Panther, the commissioner of the APA. We got my boys General Tar Heel, Mewtwo Fan Nate, In Vivid Color, and Kyle A. So many coaches, so much competition for this APA season. So hopefully we will be able to do well in this run here. We unfortunately missed the playoffs last APA season. That was like one of, if not the only Wi-Fi league that I think we missed playoffs in. The beginning of me starting Wi-Fi draft leagues until the end of 7th gen. So yeah, competition was stacked last season, but I think it's even more stacked this season. So if you want to find out the roster, check them out down in the description below. So for those of you who may have not seen the draft stream that Joey did, I'm going to be going over my team, over the mons I got every single round. We had 2 pools. Each pool had their own draft pool. So for example, throughout the season, we might be facing people that weren't in our pool that may have duplicate Pokemon. For example, there might be 2 teams that have 2, I don't know, Clefable. So we will have Clefable, and then we might face 2 other teams that had, or another team, sorry, that had Clefable as well, and then so on and so on. So just kind of keep that in mind throughout the season here, that we do face people outside of our own pool, and it's a 12-week season if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, at pick number 7 is where I was placed for pool number 1. Obviously at pick number 7, I knew I wasn't going to get anything spectacular. Unfortunately, things like Necrozma, Dragapult, the Melmetals, all of those obviously went, and me and the front office homies had our eyes set on realistically what we could get at pick number 7. I think we were choosing between either Hydreigon or Zeraora, and by the time I got to like pick number 6, if I'm not mistaken, Hydreigon got chosen. So I was really hoping that pick number 7 wouldn't take Zeraora, and luckily they did not end up taking Zeraora. So we got the most electrifying Pokemon in the format here, aka Zeraora the Rock, as our number 1 pick. I've never used Zeraora, even though it did lose access to Z-moves. I think currently in the metagame, because of its base 143 speed, it is the top 3 fastest Pokemon in the format. It is 1 base point faster than Dragapult 2, which is something we can definitely take advantage of if we face a Dragapult, or if we face 2 Dragapults this season. Its move pool is absolutely insane still. It got access to Play Rough and Aura Sphere, if I'm not mistaken. So 2 pretty cool new moves. Both have very good benefits. Unfortunately, losing Hidden Power does kind of suck a little bit, but it's not really the worst thing ever for Zeraora, just because there's not really many ground types around that are 4 times weak to HPIs anyways, and Landorus isn't currently released. So with it still having access to Grass Knot, it's going to be able to still smack ground types decently hard. And the nice thing about Zeraora is that because it's so fast, it's going to force certain prep. It's going to be able to run plus attack or plus special attack nature sometimes. So really excited to get to use Zeraora. Never used it before, hoping that it can definitely pull its weight, smack a few people with the people's elbow, hit a couple rock bottoms, and we'll see how it goes from there for this season. So yeah, definitely excited that I was able to get this at pick number 7. So moving on to round number 2, we were stuck on a few Pokemon that we were hoping would make it back to round 2. I think a few were like Terrakion, Kyurem, which now has access to Freeze Dry, Icicle Spear, and Dragon Dance, which makes it a bit more viable and kind of terrifying, honestly. And then I think another one was Grimmsnarl, which was in a tier 2. And because we kind of had in mind what Gmax we already wanted, we figured we're going to get points back from our Gmon pick. So we could probably afford to go another tier 1, or we can wait for one later in the draft. But round 1 ends, round 2 goes on, so there's only 10 people, so us being pick number 8, there's only 4 other picks. Unfortunately, Terrakion goes, Kyurem goes, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So we ended up going with Corviknight as our round 2 pick here, aka Raider, after the Viking Raiders, because it does kind of look like it's about to go into war here. So Corviknight is a very interesting Pokemon. Some people like to compare it to Skarmory, although I feel like Corviknight, in a sense, is honestly better than Skarmory, because the nice thing about it is that first off, all 3 of its abilities are absolutely amazing. Pressure, Unnerve, and Mirror Armor, all 3 have a very good chance to come to any matchup that it's tailor-made to. It's got an amazing move pool. It gets access to dual screens, which is also really nice in case we do get some good setup threats, or we get some good offense in general. It gets access to Taunt, Tailwind. Its move coverage is not entirely too crazy, but it has enough coverage to where it shouldn't be hindered entirely too often in certain matchups. Its defenses are also very, very solid. Plus, with Zeraora having Volt Absorb, this nullifies one of Corviknight's weaknesses, being electric moves. So if we can get a good water type later, then we won't have to worry about fire types, and that would be absolutely amazing. It's got a good base speed tier, good offensive prowess with iron defense. Even bulk up can be something that we can run. Nasty Plot may seem a little bit odd, I suppose, but hey, you never know. Maybe Nasty Plot could definitely come to a few games because it gets access to Steel Beam, which absolutely smacks anything pretty damn hard with it being a base 140 move, as you can see here. So Corviknight, very good defensive mon. Obviously, if it had access to something like Stealth Rocks or Spikes, it'd be infinitely better, but dual screens are pretty good. Momentum is really good. It's a solid pivot. I'm not gonna lie, after we picked Corviknight, I was a little bit hindered by it because I'm so used to having steel types that get access to Stealth Rocks. Now our steel type doesn't have Stealth Rocks, so that was something that I kind of had to keep in mind throughout the remainder of our draft, hoping that we would get some solid Stealth Rockers. So moving on to round number 3, I was really surprised that our round 3 pick lasted, because I honestly figured that whoever was in front of me, because at this point we already went down, we went up, we're going back down again, so there's 6 people in front of me to finish round 2, and then those 6 pick again before it gets back to me for round 3. So I figured in between those picks our round 3 pick would be gone, so I didn't even consider this at all on our draft plan. And I figured by round 4 I want to go ahead and get my Gmax, because it's the main Gmax I want. It's the only Gmax I want. I don't really want a high tier Gmax. Even though this is lower tier, I'd still rather take it now than risk it not coming back to us, because that would mess my entire plan up. So for round number 3, we were able to get Umaga. Rest in peace, Umaga, aka Seismitoad. And I'm really shocked, man. I thought the Seismitoad was going to be gone by the time it came back, because Seismitoad, even though yes, this is post home, I think a few things get Stealth Rocks again. Obviously more Pokemon get Toxic, but in my opinion, Seismitoad is still a really, really good Stealth Rocker. It's got amazing bulk, as you can see here, and nothing has changed really from pre-home to post-home, because it's still a very reliable Stealth Rocker. 9 times out of 10, it's always going to be able to get up Stealth Rocks. Even if your opponent knows you're running Stealth Rocks on it, why does it matter if they can't knock it out with one hit? Rocks are getting set up regardless. And the nice thing about it too is that now it got access to knockoff, which is really good, because now this gives us our second knockoff mon. And the nice thing about that is that this allows us to get rid of items, scout for items, etc, etc. Even though, again, a lot of Pokemon got access to Toxic again, and that was one niche that Seismitoad had pre-home, where it was one of the very handful of mons that wasn't a poison type that got access to Toxic. And even though it did kind of lose that, it's still a really good defensive mon in general. It can also be offensive potentially with Swift Swim if we ever choose to go down that route. And with this being a ground type and a water type, this basically pairs up just about perfectly with Corviknight. Like Corviknight plus Seismitoad by themselves are a really nice defensive core, which is absolutely amazing. So I'm hoping that Toad can still pull its weight, post-home like it does in pre-home, but we will have to wait and see. So moving on to round number 4, I checked with the people that were after me with numbers 9 and 10, and they weren't interested in the Gmax that I wanted initially. I think Ben was number 10 and he had already got Gmax Gengar, and then the person after me was Nate, if I'm not mistaken, and he wasn't interested in the Gmax I wanted. But as I said earlier, I really didn't want to risk this Gmax going because it might have not come back to me, even though it might seem a little bit early. For our Gmax captain, we decided to go with Orbeetle. This should be shiny Orbeetle. I don't know if the picture will be shiny, but if it's not, then it should be shiny Orbeetle. But we got Paul Heyman, big brain Paul Heyman. Originally, I was going to call this Bobby the Brain Heenan, but I was like, hey, Paul Heyman's dope. Who doesn't like Paul Heyman? If you're a WWE fan, you know Paul Heyman. Man's a genius, freaking awesome. And we have a really, really good Gmax in my opinion. Now, for those of you who may not know, I forgot to make this known early, sorry. But Gmax Pokemon can only run a Pokeball as their item, which means they can't be itemless, but that also means they can't run something like a choiced item, leftovers, life form, etc., etc. They can only run a Pokeball as an item, as in like a literal Pokeball in which you're supposed to catch the Pokemon in. So I don't know, maybe we'll put a luxury ball on this, Ultra Ball, we'll see. Actually, I like the luxury ball, that's my favorite Pokeball. There we go. So we're going to be running luxury ball on Orbeetle because, let's be honest, Paul Heyman is luxurious. No, stop. So yeah, the main reason why I figured Orbeetle was probably one of the better non-item Gmax Mons is because at tier 3 it gives us 40 points, which kind of makes up for us already using 180 of our 400 free points from our second tier 1 pick, which was Corviknight. So now we have 440 points minus the 180. That's math. That's how many points we have left. I'm really bad with math. I think it's like 260. Somebody's like banging their head on the keyboard right now, so I'm sorry. But yeah, so this gave us 40 extra points, which is really, really nice because now we can get some higher tier picks potentially, or an extra higher tier pick depending on how things go. But the nice thing about Gmax Orbeetle is that base 90 speed is still really good. Even if it is post home, it's still decently speedy. It gets access to some really good setup moves in Calm Mind, Agility. It gets Iron Defense, if I'm not mistaken, alongside Body Press 2, which is great. U-Turn for momentum. It gets Trick Room for support. Its Gmax move unfortunately does not set up Psychic Terrain for us, but it does set up Gravity, which can still come in very, very handy. Unfortunately, it is Dry Pass, which means we cannot Baton Pass stats, but that's not really the biggest issue, honestly. The main benefit of Gmax Orbeetle is the ton of support moves that it can carry, and the fact that it has reliable recovery while still being decently bulky. Like base 110 defense, base 120 Spadef is really, really good. Like this thing will just about always be able to live at least one hit, set up. I can then Gmax, hopefully get a kill or two, and then just kind of go from there. So that was the idea behind Gmax Orbeetle. Plus, it's a spaceship. Moving on to our round 5 pick here. I was kind of stuck on what exactly I wanted to take this next pick. I really wasn't sure if I wanted to get my first tier 2, which probably would have been Grimmsnarl, but I figured that maybe I can kind of hold off on Grimmsnarl just a little bit because Grimmsnarl wasn't entirely necessary to my plan. I just really wanted it initially, but there was like 2 other Pokemon I really, really wanted that I was going to try to work into my draft, so I figured that maybe I should take that pick this round, or maybe I can wait a little bit longer. So I decided to wait because in tier 3, the way I was planning out my draft, there wasn't many things that kind of fit my team depending on how things went. So I decided that it might be more important to get this tier 3 before I get the main tier 2 that I want, because even if the main tier 2 that I want is gone, it's not really going to be the worst thing ever because I can kind of replace it with something else and work things around. So for round number 5, I decided to get up Eddie Guerrero, aka Chandelure, Shiny Chandelure, by the way, so rest in peace to the GOAT. And the great thing about Chandelure is that this gives us a fire immunity for our Corviknight, which is amazing. And Corviknight already is immune to ground moves, which is one of Chandelure's weaknesses. So we are able to now patch up the 2 weaknesses of Corviknight within our first 5 picks, which is absolutely amazing in my opinion. But the great thing about Chandelure is that it's such a scary, especially offensive threat because of its base 145 special attack, base 80. Not entirely too spectacular, but it's definitely still very viable. Choice Scarf sets can work out pretty well. Gets access to Flame Charge, even though it is base 80 speed. It can still run Trick Room sets effectively. Obviously, it can take advantage of Sticky Webs from Orbeetle. It gets access to some nice support moves with Toxic, Pain Split, Taunt, Will-O-Wisp, Trick even. And a cool thing about it is that with heavy duty boots, it's no longer going to have to be hindered by the Stealth Rock weakness, which is actually pretty nice because its defenses are decent. Like, Chandelure is kind of tanky. You can always invest into its bulk because of its special attack being so high. You don't always need to run max on it. You can run some good bulk, and now with it not having to lose 25% of its HP upon switching, that's pretty awesome in my opinion. So yeah, Chandelure only will just about always be specially offensive, but it can do a few cool things, so I'm hoping that I'll be able to use it correctly this time around. Flash Fire, Flame Body, and Infiltrator, all 3 really awesome abilities. So moving on to round number 6 here, I figured that, okay, I need to go ahead and pick up my first tier 2 at this point, and the main tier 2 that I really wanted, because I had kind of factored this in before we initially started drafting, because I think we figured out draft order like a day before we initially started, so I kind of had an idea of like specific mons I wanted, and this was one mon I really wanted from the get-go, the main Pokemon I really wanted to use, and that is the Idolo Andrade, aka Haxorus, the mascot, my favorite Pokemon. 6-foot Haxorus here, and Haxorus is pretty awesome because currently with base 97 speed, it is so much better than what it used to be in Gen 6 and 7 because the speed of the metagame is so low. Base 97 is more than viable, man. Like, this thing is able to outspeed so many key threats in the metagame. It's able to run Scarf sets so efficiently. Dragon Dance sets are still absolutely terrifying. Base 147 physical attack stat gets access to First Impression now, which is amazing because of the priority that it does have, and the fact that now it gets access to close combat as well, which means it's able to absolutely murder steel types that otherwise it wasn't able to break through. For example, like, its best way of hitting something like Ferrothorn used to be Earthquake, but now that it gets access to close combat, what's a Ferrothorn to a Haxorus? Let me know, man. Like, Haxorus is an absolute beast. Mold Breaker and Unnerve, 2 amazing abilities if we want to not worry about things with like Levitate or multi-scale, something along those lines. Then we can run Mold Breaker. If we don't want to worry about potential berry stopping a sweep, we can just run Unnerve. Its coverage is still pretty good. I think it does get Edgequake coverage, although it gets Rock Slide as opposed to Stone Edge. Not the worst thing ever. Gets access to close combat, as I mentioned. It gets Aqua Tail, X Scissor, Poison Jab, Night Slash, First Impression now, which is really awesome, and Lost Return, I guess, but that's not really something that Haxorus ever ran in the past. Swords Dance is still absolutely ridiculously strong, man, especially with base 97 speed in this format. This thing, oh, I have high hopes for Haxorus, man. I've never got to use it in a draft. I'm hoping that it can definitely put in some work though for us here in this APA season, and that it will definitely be absolutely just murdering some mons. So moving on to our round 7 pick here, I figured that, okay, I'm gonna have to do something I really never ever and I mean ever like to do, and I'm gonna have to get more than one tier 5 for this draft due to us having 2 tier 1s and hopefully trying to get a second tier 2, because for some reason Grimmsnarl at this point is still on the board, but I'm kind of being weary on whether or not I should get it now. Maybe I can wait a little bit later, but I figure that if Grimmsnarl does get picked, it's not the worst thing ever. That would be like the least crippling pick that could get chosen from my plan, because everything else is going to be a little bit harder to replace. Grimmsnarl is kind of, if it's gone, it's okay, but if I get it, that's amazing. So it's kind of like, I'd rather prioritize my other necessary picks than get something that is not going to be that hindering if it gets chosen, essentially. So for round number 7, I decided to get, in my opinion, the best tier 5 in the board, or on the board I should say, and that is Rotom Frost, which is kind of crazy that this thing was still sitting at tier 5 honestly, because even after the redraft order, after the tiers were remade, Rotom Frost was still for some reason sitting in tier 5, which in my opinion, honestly, this is the best tier 5 out of all the tier 5 picks, because usually tier 5 is full with those mons that are really not that good. And when I tell you that this pull for tier 5 was really, really bad, it was really, like, really bad compared to previous tier 5 pulls in any generation from 6, 7, and pre-home draft pulls. Like, it was really, really bad. So Rotom Frost definitely stuck out immediately, mainly because of its access now to heavy duty boots. Much like Chandelure, it does not need to worry about the Stealth Rock weakness, and I decided to nickname Rotom Frost after Mark Henry because Mark Henry was built like a fridge. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Mark Henry. I got one of his shirts. Absolutely loved his Hall of Pain run and his World Championship run, which had lasted longer, but I think he got injured if I'm not mistaken. So rather unfortunate, but love Mark Henry, but he was kind of built like a refrigerator. So I was like, hey, Rotom Frost reminds me of Mark Henry, so we're going to go for that. Also, shouts out to the boy, to the homie, Matty Brolick, for helping me come up with some nicknames for our draft here, because they did want to do wrestling themed, and he was able to help me out with a few nicknames. So big shouts out to him. But yeah, Rotom Frost, in my opinion, best tier 5. It only really does one thing, I suppose. It runs Blizzard, it runs Thunderbolt and Volt Switch 99% of the time, but why does that matter when Bolt Beam coverage being stabbed is non-resisted by anything that is not currently, Lantern and Rotom Wash, if I'm not mistaken? Which neither of those two even have reliable recovery, so eventually they're going to get worn down over time. They're still going to be taking Stealth Rock damage, and they're going to need to cover whatever other offensive threats I have that they need to cover. So yeah, even though those are the only two mons that resist Bolt Beam coverage, everything else gets absolutely smacked for neutral or super effective stab damage coming from Rotom Frost, which is amazing in my opinion. It also now got access to Nasty Plot, which means, think about it, man, +2 Stab Thunderbolt or Stab Blizzard. That is so ridiculously hard to find something that resists. Yeah, this thing is going to be getting some very nice KOs, honestly. Like, this thing is going to force prep, because if my opponents don't prep for this, then they're going to be in for a world of trouble, because this, alongside Zeraora, in my opinion, actually pair up really well, because Rotom Frost can get rid of those pesky ground or grass types that Zeraora doesn't necessarily like to deal with, which means that makes Zeraora that much more of a threat, which is also really good in my opinion. So yeah, really excited to have Rotom Frost here. This was the main tier 5 I wanted. We did get it in our first initial draft, and we redid the draft order, we redid the pulls and all that shenanigan, and I was still able to get it here in the redraft, which is what I'm really excited for, because this thing is going to be an absolute monster. Nice momentum with the Volt Switch, great support moves, Thunder Wave, Toxic Trick, sub Nasty Plot, sub Pain Split, Nasty Plot like Defog also is really, really awesome in my opinion. So super excited to have this. So moving on to our next pick here. Again, I knew I had to get 2 tier 5s, and I was like, I might as well get this tier 5 now, because if this goes, then I'm going to be missing a certain typing, and I really don't want to go down that route. So I decided to get Mandy Rose, aka Roselia. I mean, it's a Roselia. It's a grass type, it's a grounded poison type, which you always need a grounded poison type. Now, even though Roselia is not going to be coming to every single battle this season, it's still something that I can bring regardless, because it can get up spikes, it can get up T-spikes, it has great support moves with Stun Spore and Sleep Powder, which all 4 of those moves are absolutely amazing for any type of team, especially with our team having such great offensive mons like Zeraora, Chandelure, and Haxorus that all love hazard support, especially if we are able to slow them down for the cases of Chandelure and Haxorus, or if we put something to sleep that allows Haxorus to potentially come in and set up, or Zeraora to come in and set up. It also gets access to Leech Seed, which is a nice way of gaining some type of recovery for anything on our team if we're switching in and out. It's a nice status absorber, and this still can deal with water types if we really need it to. Base 100 attack is not that bad, and because most water types are specially offensive, Roselia can still pivot into them. It still gets access to Synthesis and Giga Drain, which are really, really nice, and aromatherapy, I suppose, is a nice way of potentially getting rid of any status on our team. So yeah, I don't expect Roselia to be absolutely amazing, but it checked a few things that I needed on the team and that I wanted in the end. So yeah, we'll see how it does. Hopefully it can pull its weight in the few games that we will most likely bring it to. So moving on to our third to last pick here, I realized, okay, at this point, everybody has a dark type, which means there is a good chance I can now wait to get Grimmsnarl as my very final pick. So that's what I kind of had set in my mind at this point, which means I can prioritize the other two picks that I really wanted at this point, which was another tier 3 and a tier 4, because we don't have a tier 4 yet. We have 100 points to invest into a tier 3, and we have the 120 that we're going to put towards hopefully Grimmsnarl if it's still there, which it should still be there after these next two picks. So at tier 3, I realized that, okay, there's not really that many good stealth rockers left. As I mentioned earlier, I'm so used to my steel type being a stealth rocker. Unfortunately, Corviknight doesn't get rocked, so I had to look into other stealth rockers, and the one that was able to last was the Stallion, aka the bro, Matt Riddle Mudsdale. Now, Mudsdale's a Pokemon I've never used before, but it's also a Pokemon that is not a passive stealth rocker, which is what I really like about it. I think initially I wanted Sandaconda just because it got access to Glare, Rest with Shed Skin and Coil, but that's not the worst thing ever when Mudsdale can still be a really good tank. Base 125 physical attack is pretty awesome, honestly. We do have a little bit of a Trick Room core with a Chandelure and Mudsdale here. Like, Mudsdale in Trick Room is going to be absolutely devastating. It gets access to Body Press now, which is really great, alongside Stamina. Heavy Slam is going to be doing lots of damage because Mudsdale is very, very beefy. So hopefully we can smack a few things around with Mudsdale. It gets access to Roar, which is nice to phase out setup mons potentially. Toxic for bulky setup mons. Bulldoze for some type of speed control. Stealth Rocks, Rock Tomb, all that shenanigans. Never got to use Mudsdale, never drafted it before, so I'm hoping that it will be able to put in a little bit of work here, or it might even exceed my expectations, because honestly, they're not that high for Mudsdale. And actually, it's kind of fun if you think of Matt Riddle. But yeah, so we got the Stallion here. Hopefully, Mudsdale can pull its weight. As a stealth rocker, if we're not taunted, it should be able to reliably get them up. Check a few things, phase a few things, and we'll be good with that. So moving on to our second to last pick here. At this point, I was like, all right, I can go ahead and just get Grimmsnarl very last round. So looking through the tier 4s, there was honestly not that many tier 4s that I really wanted and that really stuck out to me that were left, but there was one that really caught my eye because of a certain move that I figured would be very beneficial to our offense, and that is going to be the New Day, aka Rapidash. Ladies and gentlemen, we got the horses in the back here with the Stallion, Mudsdale, and Rapidash here. So the great thing about Rapidash is that this has access to Healing Wish, which is amazing for any type of offense team just in general. So we have screens, we have sticky webs, we have hazards, and now we have Healing Wish to be able to give that offense of ours a second life. Also, its speed tier in 105 was amazing because I think our speed went from 145 straight down to Haxorus, which is 97. So now we got 105, which is a little bit in the middle, kind of like, yeah, something in between 105 and 143 would be a little bit better, but that's not really the biggest issue, honestly, because we can still work around that. Mainly, I just wanted this because of Healing Wish, and I guess its coverage is not that bad. Like high horsepower, Mega Horn, its dual stab is really good. Play Rough, Zen Headbutt or Psycho Cut is amazing. Wild Charge even for some coverage. Swords Dance is super handy. It gets access to Baton Pass as well, and again, it's no stat pass, but hey, Baton Pass is still momentum regardless, which is definitely something we can take advantage of. So yeah, hoping that Galarap here can put in a little bit of work. And moving on to our very last pick, Amon, I was shocked that I was able to get last round. That is going to be Nido, aka Grimmsnarl. Now we do have Grimmsnarl in the GDL, hasn't done entirely too much, but I definitely feel like this team can benefit way more from Grimmsnarl than what my GDL team has, because Grimmsnarl fits much better in this type of build where we have so much good offense, we have good setup opportunities as well. As a team player, Grimmsnarl can definitely pull its weight around. Also in itself is a very scary offensive threat with bulk up, with nasty plot, even gets access to sucker punch. Stab sucker punch off of base 120 is disgusting. Has really good abilities in Prankster and Frisk. Frisk, you guys already know I love Frisk. That's probably my favorite move. Not my favorite move, my favorite ability in Draft League format here. Its coverage is very, very solid, and we have so much on our team that is able to deal with certain things that might otherwise want to stop Grimmsnarl. So super excited to have this. Like, I don't really have much to say about Grimmsnarl because I guess I just kind of said it all. I don't know. Like, super excited to have Grimmsnarl. It's a great team supporter. Has so much good offense, has an amazing design. This is probably my top 3 favorite Pokemon in Gen 8, and it's definitely a mon that I have a lot of high hopes for in this APA season. So yeah guys, that is going to be our draft. Let me know what you think about it in the comment section below. Do you like it? Do you hate it? Are you hyped? Let me know. With that being said, week number 1 will be going up next Saturday, if I'm not mistaken, or Sunday. One day, I'll put it on the screen here. So yeah, super excited. I want to say it's next Sunday when GDL is uploaded too, but that's not going to be that big of an issue in my opinion. So regardless, I personally like this draft. Speed tiers could be a little bit better, but that's really my only nitpick, honestly. And I'm hoping that this will be able to take us to the promised land to hopefully winning another APA season. But as I said, we have a stacked roster, so we'll see just how things go. So thank you all for watching. I will see you all next week. And with that being said, leave a like, leave a comment, and subscribe if you want to see our APA run this time around. So thank you all for watching. Later, everybody.
My brain and heart are both tied in a knot, and this hinders me from crying a lot. This causing me to show no emotion. But when I said I cared, I wasn't joking. But I guess it's too late for me to become broken. For now, I'm living with no more pain, tears, or hoping. I'm just coasting. Yeah, I said I'm coasting. No more pain, tears, and hoping. For real.